just wrapped up 10 miles, 8-minute per mile pace, really keeping it super easy and just helping my body recover since I have to balance, swimming, biking, and running. So training for these 3 events, I can't go too extreme or I'll feel it in the next training session. So run done. Then we did AMRAP pull-ups, AMRAP push-ups, had breakfast. Now breakfast was a egg white blend. So what I'll do is I'll do 2 eggs and then around 250 grams of egg whites. And then I'll have my protein muffin. Today was strawberry. I do have blueberry ones that I eat religiously too, but today was strawberry. Kind of curves my sweet tooth a little, so it's nice. Now I'm sitting here gonna talk to you guys what this YouTube video is gonna be centered around, and it's gonna be like the tips I have for you if you want to train for an Ironman that I've learned across so far 12 weeks, maybe even more. Now I'm gonna mention it as I experience it in the YouTube video. So we're gonna start out with my morning, and I'm not gonna BS with you guys. Keep it straight up. This is me practicing, not just reading a book. This is true wisdom. This is where it starts. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning every morning now. And if I have to, I'll wake up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. to get in my training sessions. But normally 6 a.m. gives me the good amount of sleep that I need. But tip number 1 rides off of that. Win the morning, win the days, win your life. The world right now, and more ever than ever, it's chaotic. There's a lot going on in our heads, with our families, with our work. There's always demands of you as an individual. And people wonder why they don't have the discipline, why they don't have the time to do anything that they want. And normally it's because your mind is cluttered. And I get we don't all have the same time schedules, but we all do have demanding things on us, whether it's kids, whether it's family, whether it's our work. That takes out brain power. And what I want you to understand is if you can wake up and do the hard thing first that will give you solitude, and what solitude is kind of just quietness in your head or your own thoughts. And that could be sparked by listening to an audiobook, then maybe pausing it like I'll do, and then I'll think more about what the audiobook was saying. But just having time to clarity, because your mind is like a circuit board. I heard this before and it's so true. If you overload a circuit, the breaker's gonna trip, it's gonna blow. It's too much energy going into one circuit. If you can divide up your day, in the morning, I have this time for myself. Lunch, I do this task. Afternoon, I do this task. But if you don't get that time in the morning and win your morning, your head's gonna be cluttered. So you don't have that time alone in your head working on yourself. I love the quote where it's like, if you can't take care of yourself, you're never going to be able to take care of anybody else. And if you think about what life's purpose is to help others, and if you can't help yourself, how are you going to help others? So starting your morning by, working out hard, training, you're helping yourself, which in turn is going to help others. The more disciplined you can be with yourself, the more you can hold others accountable. So that's why I think we should all do hard things in the morning and be pretty resilient with waking up early. I didn't used to be that way, but like I said, it's changed my life. I don't budge now. As soon as my alarm goes off, I do not snooze it. I really do not snooze it. You could ask my fiance, I get right out of bed now. Why would you want to live your life on snooze? And I know this sounds extreme, but we're only given so many days. So make the most of your hours and your life will become more fruitful. So that's what I wanted to say. That's tip number 1 of Ironman prep. Wake up early, do the hardest workout you have that you don't want to do. This could be applied to marathon work or training. Get that out of the way so that you can be a better person, grow physically, mentally, spiritually, and have some calmness in your mind, which allows you to show up later as a better person for others around you. So that is tip number 1. Now we're gonna hit our next training session. So let's do it. So we're back in the home gym. I'm gonna share with you guys the next tip, and it's gonna be around weight training. Why I do it, why I think it's important, especially during an Ironman prep, but we're gonna hit a push day today. I follow a 3-day split during Ironman prep. Gonna hit this workout first and then talk more about the tip I have with weight training. So we just finished up our weight training session. I forgot to show you guys lunch. Chicken wrap burritos, too hungry. But I want to talk about the second tip, which is going to be weight training. It is probably the most slept on part of Ironman training. The reason I say it is because I'll be real. It is typically the last thing I want to do, right? Because, you're training with biking, running, swimming, and maybe you're not doing an Ironman, maybe you're doing marathon training, or maybe you're doing some endurance training and you don't want to weight train. Why is that? Well, because when you weight train and you train the proper way, it is hard. It requires a lot of power, a lot of mental focus to move the weight the right way, to move it with intensity. It's hard. It's much easier for a lot of people to just go on the treadmill or to go run. Now, with that being said, I think it's so important to do the hard thing, to do the weight training to fit it in, because I'm going to be real with you. It is much easier for me to go run 10 miles than it is to weight train, which is crazy because before I got into endurance training, I could, it was the opposite. Lifting was much easier and then running was much harder. But this typically happens when you start splitting your energy between two things. Like when you just do one thing, it's much easier to do one thing. So that's why it makes it much harder to weight train. And also you're just tired. You're building up fatigue through all the endurance training. So the reason I think it's so important and the tip I have is to include, an upper body day at least and a lower body day at least in your Ironman training or in your endurance training, because it's going to help longevity and it's going to help longevity in the sport, your body, your life, and then also your performance and your health. The reason I say that is because we know, there's so much research. Weight training increases your muscle mass. When your muscle mass increases, is almost like a longevity tissue. It helps your metabolic health. It helps you uptake more glycogen and feed that muscle, which is going to give you more energy, more vitality. And also, as you get older, muscle doesn't get easier to build or to maintain. You have to keep doing it. That's why I really didn't cut it out, because if I could just maintain, I probably wouldn't lift as much. But because I know that the stimulus of lifting is what keeps it on me, that's why I do it. And then obviously eating high protein is going to help keep that muscle. But the main message is I am training for an Ironman right now in this season of life, but I don't want to go the rest of my life losing all this muscle mass and vitality just for this one thing. So that was one side of the tip for the reason that I think everybody should still weight train. And two, we can't ignore power to weight ratio. So I had somebody comment on my Instagram not too long ago, and they were like, well, you would be faster and much more efficient. You don't want to have that upper body mass. So two things that go through my head is, one, I like having muscle. I enjoy weight training. So I don't really care. I'm not trying to win the Olympics or the Ironman. I'm doing it because it's making me a better person for others, hopefully inspiring others to do it. And also just, my quest in life. It was just something I wanted to do. And I don't think anything's wrong with that. I think too many people get caught up in the time of what they run the marathon in or what they do the Ironman in. And it's I get you want to be competitive with yourself. I still care about those things, but it's not going to change the whole trajectory of my life. I'm not just a triathlete. That's why I've done multiple things, because I don't just do one thing. That's just never how I've been. And some people are different, but I don't agree that you have to just completely discard one area of your life just because you want to accomplish this one goal. When in reality, I think power to weight ratio is the most important thing. That's why watts per kilogram on the bike is such a big talking portion. Yeah, weight is part of the watts per kilogram, but it's also how much power you put out. So I think obviously the leaner you are and the stronger you are, the better your power to weight ratio is going to be for swimming, for biking and running, or if you're doing a marathon. The stronger you are at your body weight, the better. I don't think anybody would argue that. So how do you get strong? Well, you have to lift. You have to do some hypertrophy. That is the second part of tip number 2 is it increases your power to weight ratio, which is going to make you stronger, more durable, and not break down when your body gets fatigued, because your body can take that stimulus because it's stronger and also put out more power. When somebody who doesn't weight train, they might be faster at first, but I think, your body tends to give what you ask of it. So if you've been putting a higher stressor through strength training and cardio, I think it just has more durability in the latter half of the race. That's just my opinion. I don't know if it's true, but I do know power to weight ratio is true. So the stronger you can be at a leaner body composition, that's probably the best option. So that's just my tip for number 2. And I think a lot of people will understand, a lot of people will disagree, but I'm just sharing my personal opinion. And I do know that if you don't weight train, you will lose muscle, and especially when we talk about these ultra endurance races like an Ironman. All right, so I'm gonna put you on my favorite meal. This is oatmeal. So what it is it's low sugar maple brown oatmeal from Quaker, 1 scoop of vegan BPN oatmeal cookie, 1 scoop of salted caramel cookie, pumpkin, tons of fiber, really good, peanut butter for more calories, and then blueberries, and then a yogurt. So a ton of stuff in there, mix it up, and it gets like this thick consistency. In an Ironman prep, I'm super hungry all the time. So having things with calories, but also micronutrients, like from the pumpkin and the nut butter, and then getting the protein from, the whey and the yogurt. It's just, honestly, I think this is one of the best meals I have in my plan. So yeah, if you like pumpkin, I highly suggest trying it. And if you don't, just do it without pumpkin. But this is going to be our second post-workout meal. Good morning, guys. We are hitting our next training session. Gonna just continue on with the tips, but first, always, this is the next tip. Not really. Black coffee in the morning. I don't think anything puts you in a better vibe in the morning than black coffee. I've actually been alternating between a black coffee, and we've been making brown sugar shaken espressos. So I have an espresso machine and a coffee machine. When I make lattes, I've been putting brown sugar in it with stevia, and then milk. Tastes better than Starbucks. But I get tired of that, so that's why, I have a coffee maker and I'll just drink black coffee. Sometimes it's nice to not have all that stuff in it. So yeah, we're gonna sip this, start the training day, and move on with the next insight that I have with Ironman training. All right, so we just wrapped up a 30-mile ride, and we did that ride at 200 watts, but I want to go into the next tip of this YouTube video, which is going to be practicing patience. There's a quote by Aristotle. It says that patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. What this tells me, and what I've experienced with Ironman training, you need patience. There's going to be a lot of monotonous bike rides, a lot of monotonous runs, and a lot of monotonous swims when you are staring at the bottom of the pool. Day to day, at first it's exciting. You're training for an Ironman, super exciting. This could be a marathon prep, this could be whatever you're doing, starting a new job, super exciting. But what happens when you lose that spark? Because naturally it's going to happen no matter what you do. There's going to be a time where the mundane is going to require patience. It is going to be bitter. It is going to be challenging to stay faithful, to stay strong in that pursuit. Patience is bitter, but the fruit is sweet. So what I'm saying here is, in order to get the fulfillment in life, or to build yourself into what you believe you were meant to be, to help others, that all requires bitter, hard seasons in life. If you push through that hard, bitter feeling that we all want to quit on, its fruit is sweet. You can enjoy and have calmness, experience some of the best fruits of life, of feeling fulfilled, feeling like you're making a difference. All that comes from transforming in the process. When we lack the ability to transform when things get hard or to adapt, and we just quit on ourselves, that's when life becomes dull, because then you don't get to experience what the other side looks like if you just push through. So moral of the story is, if you're in an Ironman prep, or if you're in any challenging physical prep or work or life situation, remember patience and stillness is key. It's bitter, it's hard, but the fruit are sweet. The outcome, what's waiting for you on the other side that you may not see or understand, it's going to be sweet if you just persevere and you keep going. So that's what I wanted to say. So yeah, let's go swim, and then I'm going to share with you the last point of what has helped me with my performance as an athlete who has done almost everything you could think of in terms of endurance training and strength training, and what I've learned through all of it that I'm going to share in the next point that really took my performance to another level. All right, so the last tip of this Ironman prep, or anything that you're training for, everything that I do to help with recovery and help with consistency of training, the data that I track, and how I use that data to help me show up every single day. So let's dive into it. So the first is going to be looking and planning a schedule. So how I structure the data, the training throughout the week. This is going to be different depending on what you're training for, but I personally can't handle more than 3 hours every day of the week. So I keep it around 2.5 hours Monday through Friday. Now Saturday and Sunday are going to be big workouts. But the reason I keep my workouts relatively lower volume, if we're talking about Ironman training during the week, is so that on the weekends I can have these huge efforts, which is where you're really gonna, build that aerobic capacity. But if I tried to do too much during the week, I wouldn't be able to get through those weekend long rides, weekend long swims, weekend long runs. So the message here is structure your week and focus on consistency over intensity. And then on the weekends, maybe make up for some more longer sessions. So that way, you're not overtaxing your system and you can hit those long endurance or long training sessions and not be burnt out because you didn't burn yourself out through the week. So try to focus on consistency of something that's manageable for you throughout the week. And then on the weekend, put in those bigger efforts. So that's what I do. Saturday and Sunday are my big days. Mondays are my recovery days. So normally I'll just lift or something and swim. Next thing that I track is going to be calories. So calories are going to be super beneficial. I'm sure you guys have all heard this. I'll show you kind of what my data looks like. But on a typical day, I'm looking through my phone. I track every day to make sure I'm keeping up enough calories to make sure that I don't develop REDS, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome. And I definitely had that when I got my stress fracture shooting for my sub 3 hour marathon. That is very easy to follow into. If you just undereat for 3 days, you're going to be in a huge deficit if you're training hard. Somebody that is just lifting or running, 3 times a week, you don't have to worry too much about that. But it's when you start really stepping up the mileage and putting yourself in a deficit when you're, training over an hour and a half of cardio every single day and weight training on top of that. That's when you could follow into REDS, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome, which is when your body's not getting enough nutrients. So it breaks down. you develop chronic fatigue, hormones tank, all that. I had that, and that's where I got my stress fracture. It was diagnosed in my metatarsal, and that's what the doctor said. It was REDS, and that's what happened. So highly encourage you guys to track your calories. The things I focus on with tracking calories is I look at my Garmin. So my Garmin typically says I burn around 4,500 to 4,900 calories a day. So I always try to replace somewhat close to that. Now, not every day is perfect. Some days I come up short. Some days I might eat 3,800. Some days I might eat the 4,800. But typically it is hard to get the food in, especially when you're focusing on quality over, just quantity. I think there's a mix of both, though, is what I'm trying to say. Is you want to get in total calories, but you want to make sure that you're getting quality calories, because say you fill up with a bunch of junk food to meet those calories, you're not getting the nutrients in to replenish, the body and heal it from the micro tears of training, and the vitamins to support everything that your body needs. So how I structure my day is I eat pretty much perfect throughout the day. Perfect, not perfect, but really healthy throughout the day. And then if I'm low on calories, I'll use yogurt bowls. So I'll take yogurt and put maybe a scoop of whey protein in it and put a lot of honey on it. Granola, oats, I'll crush up like 2 Go bars, throw that in there, just get a ton of calories in from something that has a lot of carbs and a lot of protein. And then sometimes I'll put peanut butter in it to get more fat. So that's kind of how I catch up on calories or utilize my calories later in the day. And basically that just helps. Like I said, most of us, we tend to undereat if we don't keep aware of how much protein we're eating and how much total calories we're eating. So by tracking, it keeps you aware, so it's easy to adjust and change. I always tell people what you don't measure doesn't change. So if you find that you don't have the energy or the vitality after your workouts or going into the weekend, it's because you're depleted. I truly believe a lot of it's not willpower. It is just depletion. Like your body is depleted. It doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to do anything. So if you can consistently eat somewhat close to your caloric burn, you're going to notice that you have more energy, more recovery, more vitality. So my macros, how they're split up, and this is going to be dependent on everybody's different, but I'll just share my macros. 500 to 700 grams of carbs a day, 230 grams of protein. That's way more than I need, but I just like eating protein, so that's what it is, and I think it helps me recover. But I'd say 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein, and then fat's like 120 grams. So that is kind of like my macros. It adjusts. Some days, honestly, I'll probably hit, like there was a day I hit 900 grams of carbs, but that was a huge training day. And typically try to just listen to your body. If you're not exercising a ton, you don't need that many carbs. But if you are, like obviously you need to replenish that glycogen, which is where carbs are stored in your muscles to give you energy to train. So that is what I track and really manipulate depending on my intensity, depending on how much I'm burning. I just look at my Garmin and it's an estimate. All this is estimates. It's not perfection. It just keeps you in a routine of fueling and a good idea of how much you're burning so you can replace that. The last thing is going to be a Garmin watch or any watch. I don't think there is any perfect watch at all. I use a Garmin. I've always used Garmin. I have no affiliation with them. But aside from the calories that I use to track it, I use to track my heart rate variability, which basically tells you how well you're recovered. And sometimes, as of recent, my recovery went to the floor. And I don't drink, and it's nothing against drinking. I just don't like to drink. So I went to a wedding though, and I had a shot in like a Diet Coke or something. And I woke up the next day and my HRV was at the floor, and it's never been like this whole Ironman prep. So it just goes to show you, personally, I think the effect was super, super impactful for me because I probably hadn't had a drink in 2 years. And then I had that one shot. I feel like it could have been placebo. It could have been staying up a little later. But I truly believe it's like if someone doesn't drink caffeine and then they have coffee, they're going to be wired. I think because I don't drink, it affected me. So moral of the story is alcohol does affect your body. I won't have another alcoholic beverage for a long time. Nothing against it. I don't typically like to drink. I was for a wedding and I was there. But I was surprised. So it just goes to show you that, that is something to be considered if you want to focus more on recovery, limit your drinking. And then, so HRV, that tells you how well you're recovered. Heart rate, my resting heart rate, I'll look at that. Sometimes if it spikes, like here's a graph. So it spiked last night. That sometimes is due to like fatigue, like a big training session. So yesterday I had a big bike ride and a swim. So, I woke up the next morning, my heart rate was a little higher, but I felt great on today's run. But I look at that just to see kind of how my body's functioning. So I just monitor my heart rate. If it starts climbing too much, I know maybe I'm getting sick, maybe I'm getting a little fatigued, maybe I'm in a deficit. But typically I look at heart rate too. As it gets lower throughout the prep, it means I'm getting fitter, my resting heart rate. So occasionally I'll get into 38, which is the lowest I've seen it, which is good for me. So that's one thing I look at. And then last is going to be my heart rate during training. Because an Ironman is kind of like basically your ability to keep going. It's a lot of zone 2 work. So I try to keep my heart rate at zone 2 in almost everything I do, except if there's like a desired outcome to push intensity. If there's a desired outcome to push intensity, I'll kind of just look at my heart rate periodically. I don't analyze it too much. By now I have a good feel of how things feel when I'm zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. I can feel the heart rate pick up, the breathing heavily. But I say tracking heart rate when you're doing these exercises, similar to like what I said way back when we first started, is you want to be consistent in your intensity. You can't train hard every single day. You just can't recover. Well, I can't. So I'm a master at zone 2. I love zone 2. It's chill and it works, right? Like it's just time on feet, time in the saddle, time in the water. But building that engine allows you to get more efficient. And the Ironman's about efficiency. So is marathon. So is every endurance sport about efficiency. So the more efficient you are, the better you're going to be. And how you get more efficient is running at or swimming at or biking at a zone 2 heart rate, which for me is like 120, 130 beats per minute, which you can sustain for a long period of time. And you practice sustaining that for a long period of time. If you were a sprinter, you would be the opposite. You would be, okay, I have 10 seconds to run as hard as I can. Your heart rate is going to be much different and you're going to train differently. So it's all depending on your goals, but that's kind of how I do it. If I do a hard workout, I typically really only do like one hard bike session. My running, I don't really run hard during this because I just can't recover from it. And I'll swim hard. So the reason I bike and swim hard maybe once a week is because it's low impact. So it doesn't overtax my body as much as running does. So that's kind of everything. But gonna wrap up the YouTube video here. Let me know if you have any questions. And thank you guys for watching Ironman Prep episode 12 in the bag. We're 7 weeks out. Let's freaking go.